It is my honor to present the Access to Justice Community Leadership Award to the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network and its Executive Director, Brenda Rodriguez Lopez. The Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, also known as WISN, was founded in November of 2016 as a response to the attacks that undocumented immigrant community members were facing across the state during the last federal administration. It is now a network of over 400 organizations, coalitions, and individuals in Washington state. What began as a rapid response hotline in defense of immigrant communities facing immigration enforcement and detention has evolved to a forward-looking effort to affirmatively advance the rights of immigrants in Washington state. WISN's recent work includes the distribution of $127 million in emergency cash assistance to undocumented community members who were originally left out of the federal stimulus relief, an advocacy focus on healthcare access and unemployment insurance for undocumented immigrants, and the revamping of its deportation defense in rapid response. Its hotline serves as a resource directory, connecting undocumented immigrant community members across the state to legal aid services, responding to immigration enforcement and detention, and supporting the community with questions about Washington Immigrant Relief Fund, and connecting community members also to crucial services and resources to help meet their needs. WISN is a trusted network that community members use to enter our access to justice programs. WISN plays the role of being a connector. It helps create, amplify the voices of undocumented community members and advocate for new programs through community-led efforts in Washington state. An example that highlights WISN's impact is the collective effort that WISN helped lead just recently, bringing the community and legal aid partners together to recognize that a long-standing structural barrier existed in an Office of Civil Legal Aid restriction. WISN's community leadership and the legal strategy, co-led by our partners, Community Legal Services and other partners, resulted in Washington's legislature lifting the restriction that prevented access to state-funded legal services to undocumented community members. The work of the Access to Justice community and collaboration with WISN means that WISN is now a contractor with OCLA to connect immigrant communities to service providers here in our state. WISN's executive director, Brenda, has been part of the movement from the beginning and has been instrumental in much of WISN's success. Her leadership centers the impacted community and is intentional in building partnerships to reduce barriers for our immigrant communities here in Washington. She leads WISN with a forward-looking vision, mobilizing communities to address the needs faced by the undocumented members of our communities. And WISN's presence is strong statewide and has been a critical and influential leader, not only in Washington state, but across the country. I invite you to continue to support WISN's efforts and join me in congratulating WISN and Brenda for their accomplishments and their leadership. Congratulations, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Malu, for the warm introduction and the mentorship over the past years. Today, I humbly accept this award from the Access to Justice Board, an accomplice of WISN over the last 4 years to create access to justice for undocumented immigrants in Washington state. I am Brenda Rodriguez Lopez, undocumented and unafraid, Executive Director of the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. I have lived in Washington state for over 18 years as undocumented along with my farm working family. Growing up in rural Washington, I was very much afraid and living in the shadows. I remember my mom turning down the radio, my dad holding onto the steering wheel with both hands so tightly I could see them turning white. My brothers and I would hold our breath, frozen to our seats when a police car would follow us. and the immediate relief and gasp for air when that police car would turn into another street. I can still hear my brother's voice 3 years ago asking me if it was safe for him to go to the courthouse to pay a traffic ticket. An inconvenient errand to someone with citizenship was becoming the last place undocumented immigrants were seen at. That's the terror that my community and that my family have lived in for decades. And during one of the darkest times in history under the Trump presidency, our immigrant rights movement came together and Wyson was created to fight back. Over the last 4 years, our network has grown to over 400 organizations in 22 counties. A trusted community hotline was created to document ICE activity and mobilize when immigration came knocking at our door. The hotline has informed the broader ecosystem in our movement, the needs on the ground, and has sparked strategies to create systemic change. Our work has evolved, and in the last year and a half, during the pandemic, we pivoted to bridge resources and services to undocumented immigrants across the state. While they knew our communities would be hit hard, we partner with funders and community donors, re-granting nearly $1 million to grassroots groups in rural communities and across Washington state, investing in the capacity and growth of immigrant organizations to provide COVID-19 relief to undocumented communities. This work led to a strong, united front that won $127 million in cash assistance for COVID relief committed by the governor for our undocumented community, making Washington state a national leader on the issue. The success of the Washington Immigrant COVID-19 Relief Fund was the result of the investment in and collaboration with over 69 organizations who conducted vital outreach and application assistance, documenting the need of 94,000 people in an 8-week application period. Our work has documented the undocumented and shows our community power is undeniable. Our most recent legislative victory, which eliminates the restrictions on the use of civil legal aid funds to be used for undocumented people, has already made an impact across the state. The need for undocumented people to have access to civil legal representation has only exacerbated during the pandemic, and we must continue to meet the crisis. COVID-19 isn't the last crisis our community is going to face, and our movement must continue to meet the crisis to respond and build. The commitment of partners like the Access to Justice Board will allow us to intentionally span and build alongside the community and structure the social justice revolution. I understand that our collective liberation is not tied to an administration and our work must continue. I ask that you continue to be uncomfortable. I ask that you continue to spread power. I ask that you continue to trust the vision of directly impacted people, as our futures are bound together and we are bound to win.
I'm here with Chief Justice Gonzalez to present the Access to Justice Judicial Leadership Award to the 9 justices of the Washington Supreme Court as members of the judiciary who have shown significant leadership in improving access to justice system. Justice Gonzalez, you and your fellow justices exhibited important leadership in the summer of 2020 when you issued a statement calling on the legal community to recognize its responsibility to address systemic racism. The statement calls on judges, attorneys, and all who work in the justice system to recognize our collective, systemic, and individual roles in devaluing Black lives and our responsibility to develop a greater awareness of racial bias and to do the work to build an anti-racist system. Just as importantly, your words were followed by action when the court established the Racial Justice Consortium, which was launched with a year-long mission to identify actions and structural changes that could help end racism and the devaluation of Blacks, Indigenous, and people of color lives within the state judicial system. All too often, lofty words echoing the cries of oppressed are joined with hollow expressions of condolence and held up as a step towards change. The statement you issued last year did not mince words. It challenged the legal community to bear responsibility for this ongoing injustice. There was a recognition that to eradicate racism requires the legal community to embrace, include, and lift the voices of those who have been most harmed by our legal system. You shook the foundations of the legal community, and it shows in the actions of commissions, committees, courts, and administrators to carry out their work using a race equity lens. You provided the necessary tension for moving beyond the norm and challenged us to reflect deeper to build the courage to end racism and make justice the new norm. Your statement concluded with you and your fellow justices reaffirming your deepest level of commitment to achieving justice by ending racism. You urged all of us to follow you in this moral imperative. Through your leadership, the 9 justices of the Washington Supreme Court have issued a call to action that continues to reverberate as we work towards a more just world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this recognition. On behalf of the Supreme Court, we want to thank the ATJ Board for everything that you do for equity. Coming from you, the Access to Justice Board, this Judicial Leadership Award is particularly meaningful to each of us. The justices have worked very hard to bring us closer to the promise that we're all equal before the law during this difficult pandemic. We have convened people from across the state to issue emergency orders to keep trial courts working, to help get people in the judicial branch vaccinated so they can safely do their work, and for getting adequate funding for access to justice for everyone. And we want to thank you for recognizing not just the titular head, but the entire court. And I want to expand that to include our staff in the mix of who's getting recognized today. Particularly, I want to focus on our law library and on our clerk's office. The library and the clerk's office have as their mission open service to the public, and they've continued to provide that during the difficulties we've encountered. The library with curbside pickup and additional resources to help people with the research even at a distance. And the clerk's office working to improve access and to remove technical barriers, including for people who are incarcerated or face language barriers. You mentioned the Racial Justice Consortium working to help us live up to the principles and to the rhetoric in our letter from June of last year. I'm also proud of our Gender and Justice Commission working to have a survey done in the judicial branch to assess where we are regarding gender, sexual harassment, prevention, et cetera. With each of these efforts and working with you, we hope to make this a better nation and our judicial system more true to the promise that we've made about access to justice for everyone. Thank you for this recognition and for the work that the ATJ Board does.
In her 25 years at Team Child, Rosey Thurman opened and closed more than 2,600 cases with youth. That's a whole lot for any legal aid attorney, but for anyone who knows the commitment Rosey makes to clients, a holistic commitment where she ensures every possible legal goal and oftentimes every extra legal goal is accomplished before closing the case, it is an almost incomprehensible number. On top of that number, there is undoubtedly an also vast number of youth who Rosey has benefited through the unrecorded time of her advising other professionals and youth outside of the traditional attorney-client relationship. If anyone knew of Rosey and they also knew a youth in need of legal services in Spokane, they called Rosey, who was famously generous with her time. In addition to all of her work directly with youth, she has passed on her knowledge of systems and ideas for their improvement to countless other community leaders and legal professionals in the service of youth. She was instrumental in making child in need of services petitions an accessible and meaningful mechanism for unhoused youth in Spokane, something still not replicated in most counties. She's been a leader in community-driven transformational policy towards a more equitable Spokane public schools, and she was looked to whenever anyone was looking to improve youth housing services in Spokane. Rosey's nomination for this award was jointly written and signed on to by 12 members of the Access to Justice community in Spokane, and I'm sure it would have been much bigger if we had the time to approach more people. It was a diverse group of people who themselves have all done so much work towards access to justice, but they all recognized Rosey for her career of service. They said her care, empathy, and unwavering dedication make her a beacon of inspiration for all who have the honor of working with her. They also said Rosey is at the top of the list of individuals who inspire and encourage others to similarly engage. There are not enough accolades to be sent her way. She is the epitome of who we should all strive to be. I agree. I worked alongside with Rosey for 7.5 years. With that 7.5 years, Rosey inspired me and did more for my professional development than anyone else ever has. I miss you every day in this work, and believe me, I hear from people on a weekly basis how much they too miss you. Rosey, it is an honor to name you the 2021 Access to Justice Advocacy Award winner.
Wow, Dan, that's overwhelming. Thank you. I want to acknowledge those who nominated me first. Dan, you, Ann Lee, Francis Odwalla, Sally Pritchard, Larry Brown, Inga Laurent, Gloria Ochoa, Natasha Hill, Jan and Judge Paul Bastine, Janae Ball, Dennis and Teresa Cronin, retired Judge Gregory Seipold, and Morgan Maxey. These people are all justice warriors in the Access to Justice community, and they are the people I admire most in the Spokane and Washington world. I also want to express appreciation to Team Child for providing me the unique opportunity to work with Spokane's youth, as they are the greatest clients and make the work so rewarding. The grant that started Team Child was one of the first in the nation to recognize that youth were not being served equitably in their legal and social systems. This recognition sparked a movement across the country to provide lawyers for youth. I have to believe Lawyers for Youth lead to the movement to abolish the school-to-prison pipeline, which seriously harmed students of color and disability. It has also given pause to how the juvenile justice system is not the answer for young people to learn and grow to be successful citizens in our state. I feel a little awkward receiving this award when I know there is not just me who does the work. It is absolutely amazing, wonderful clients, people like Dan, the families of the clients, those who make up the Access to Justice community, those who provide services in Spokane and throughout the state of Washington are the ones that make it possible. Advocacy is a team sport. All of you who are part of this conference make up that team. It is you that with your combined effort, your talent, your treasure, and your heart that will continue to make Washington a place where justice happens. Thank you all.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be able to join you virtually and to celebrate Benefits Law Center and Alex Doolittle. My name is Abigail Daquiz, and I'm the current chair of the board at BLC. The ATJ Leadership Award recognizes leaders within the Alliance who've played a significant leadership role in building and promoting a statewide integrated civil legal aid delivery system, one that's responsive to people facing economic and other barriers. As many of you know, BLC has been providing legal advice and representation to people with disabilities navigating the Social Security system since 1997. Alex has served as executive director and BLC's fearless leader since 2009. She served on and lent her leadership as co-chair of the Delivery Systems Committee of the ATJ board. Under her leadership, BLC has grown exponentially to provide accessible legal advocacy to clients living with physical and mental disabilities so that they can gain financial and medical stability. She leads a team of talented Social Security lawyers and paralegals who provide holistic services to our community members. Alex has grown capacity through strategic partnerships and strong relationships within the Alliance. This has meant that in the decade plus that she's been at the helm, BLC has been able to say yes to more clients, and she's doubled our legal staff. Of significance, Alex's visionary leadership has made real the Benefits Law Center Justice Bus. BLC's lawyers have always met clients where they are, at shelters and libraries and multi-service centers. And now, with the Justice Bus, BLC has really created a mobile law office that connects its expert attorneys to the clients where they are in their communities, in an accessible office setting with the space and privacy to care for the whole client. It's Alex's vision, persistence, and focus on the whole client that's really made this possible. And Alex, she continues to reach and challenge herself, her staff, and her board to grow. I am proud to call her my friend. I learn from her constantly, and our community is so lucky to have her. Alex, congratulations, and thank you for your continued service and leadership.
Thank you. I am Alex Doolittle. I'm the Executive Director at Benefits Law Center, and I feel really lucky to have the chance to grow as a person, as an advocate, and as a leader at Benefits Law Center. As a part-time staff attorney and then an attorney, and now as the Executive Director, it's been a real journey and a real honor. There are so many exceptional staff members and board members and supporters who are the community that raised this organization into position because we need high quality Social Security advocacy in Washington State. And it only exists, Benefits Law Center, because it's needed in the community. And the Alliance recognizes that. I think it was 2012 that Kirsten Barron led a visioning exercise for the Alliance after a Goldmark luncheon, where the question at hand was effectively, how can we do more with less after this economic crash? And the need was greater and the resources were more scarce. And I raised my hand and said, I have a brilliant idea. Let's put attorneys in bread trucks and they can drive around and deliver services right out of their mobile home, and it will be their office. And that was wildly unpopular. But the concept of mobile legal services stuck with me. And as a way to meet people where they are, and to meet people who don't engage with the legal system in a traditional way, to put clients in a position of power, and to allow clients to just hold still while we go the distance. It took some time, but to make the idea become a reality is a dream come true for me. And it's because the Access to Justice community supports and believes in innovation. And now there are staff at BLC who have picked up this project and made it into a living, breathing, gap-filling solution. So thank you for this incredible honor and to your commitment to the work ahead of all of us. Onward.
I am so excited today to present the Access to Justice Board's Leadership Award to Lori Isley. I couldn't be more excited, and I can't think of a more deserving person to receive this for her lifetime achievement. Lori is an inspired, creative, and brilliant lawyer. She inspires her colleagues, she inspires her clients, and the communities that she works with. She has worked most recently with farm worker and immigrant communities, but has also represented tenants and many low-income folks across the state. Lori has ensured that everyone in our state, regardless of their immigration or incarceration status, has basic rights. The right to safety, the right to overtime work, the right to be protected by the Fourth Amendment. She has stood up to growers, powerful agricultural forces. She has fought for healthcare for people who are undocumented, made sure that hospitals in the Yakima Valley were providing charity care so that everyone in our state could have access to the care that they needed when they were sick or ill. Lori made sure that everyone had access to the democratic process in her community. She fought city council. She made sure that the great work that was done by our colleagues at the ACLU for voting rights in Yakima were held up when there was a movement and initiative to have a strong mayor. Lori and her colleagues filed suit and stopped that initiative. The next day, after the two cases were filed, the city council withdrew that, which would have decrease the democratic power of the Latinx community in Yakima. She fought for enforcement of the Open Meetings Act so everyone would know what was on the agenda at City Hall. She fought for safe housing. She argued several cases before the Washington Supreme Court to advocate for basic rights for farm workers and for H-2A workers. Now, in our state, one of the few states, farm workers, particularly dairy workers, will receive overtime pay. Her colleagues knew and know that any defense counsel that saw her name on the pleadings would be fearful, because they would know that there was someone who was standing up for their client, standing up to their client, who would bring the harms to light and would probably almost always ultimately vindicate their rights in court. Not only is Lori a tremendous, amazing advocate, but she's a fantastic leader. She has done outreach and deep mentorship with dozens and dozens of young people from the community to consider careers in the law and build a pipeline for the community. She has mentored countless Laurel Rubin Fellows through our program and through other programs. She supported creative partnerships with Heritage University, enabling undergraduate students to have an opportunity to intern and learn about the law and legal careers. One young person that she mentored from the community who was in high school ended up going to Stanford and having a career in the law. I can't say enough to thank Lori for her tremendous work and advocacy, and I am so happy to present her with this award. Thank you.
Thank you, Murph. And special thanks also to Francis Adewale, the chair of the Access to Justice Board, who nominated me for this award. It's really my great privilege to be recognized by you and this community, my community. I want to thank three groups of folks who have been with me on the journey Murph just described. First, to my legal services colleagues, to Ada Shen Jaffe and Don Kinney, who took a chance on me 30 years ago. And to all my colleagues who have worked with me here in Yakima, to the housing greats who got me started, and of course, to my fellow farm worker advocates, and to all who supported this work, thank you. Second, I want to thank our special partners in the private bar, who with their many talents and encouragement, joined us in our farm worker litigation, supporting us in forging new paths and righting historic wrongs borne by workers of color. Thank you. And third, to our client community, who similarly took a big chance on me, who invited me into their circle of concern, who entrusted me to advocate on their behalf, and who sought justice, not just for themselves, but justice for all. Thank you. It has been my privilege and joy.
Edmund Witter once told me that there's two types of people in the world, those that people run to and those they run from. He didn't consider himself either. Instead, he told me in a very self-deprecating way that people don't flock to him. He's like a nucleus with electrons orbiting around. People are always around him, but they always keep some distance. I thought he was being ridiculous, and I'm pretty sure I told him as such. In hindsight, I think I understand what he means. He is constantly surrounded by people who need something from him to extract a little of his brilliance so that we can carry on with our own tasks. He is someone that people, from the staff he supervises to news reporters to state senators, call for his input or to fix something at all hours of the day. And the craziest part is that he almost always answers. If he knows it's important to you, to the community, to the greater good, he will make time for it even when you know he could not possibly have the time. You know that saying about how Beyonce has the same 24 hours of the day as you do? Well, at least Edmund lives up to it. How he manages to be so many things for so many people while being a partner and a father is beyond me. I'm confident he has a clone or can travel through time. In seriousness, though, what makes a great leader is someone who doesn't settle, someone who constantly strives to improve the material conditions of those most marginalized in society, and that's Edmund. In his few years in Seattle, He has helped remedy an unfair state of affairs when it comes to tenant rights. Edmund quickly realized that tenants deserve so much better and their government could better represent them. It is thanks to Edmund that renters now have a seat at the table, a table that too often has only represented the interests of those with power. A lot of people go through life being very comfortable with the status quo because it either benefits them or it doesn't really affect them. Edmund is a cisgender white male attorney and one of the smartest people I have ever met, who could definitely make a lot more money with a lot less stress if he wanted to. But he chooses to be on the ground, fighting for us all to have the access to the most basic and fundamental right of housing and shelter. I asked my colleagues what they would want me to include for this speech, and the things that they shared about how they feel about him, not just as their boss, but as a person, makes it very clear that he is incredibly admired by his team. He has cultivated an environment at HJP that pushes us towards growth and creativity, to be the best advocates we can be, not simply in performance, but in caliber, in the risks we take to imagine a better world. Edmund's faith in others is enviable. Even though he himself is a wealth of knowledge, he trusts the opinions of those around him and seeks out our perspectives. Although he hates the spotlight and to take any credit at all, preferring to work in the shadows, he deserves this recognition. The Housing Justice Project would not be what it is, and we would not be who we are without Edmund's leadership. His dedication to a more equitable community, especially within tenant rights, is extremely rare. The world of housing law, when you have to tell someone their home is no longer theirs, can be traumatic. So much so that it's hard to find attorneys who want to do this work. When we talk about access to justice, a lot of folks think that means tenants just having their day in court and not getting immediately kicked out by their landlord. Edmund knows that true justice goes so far beyond that because people's lives don't start and end at our office. If we weren't addressing the institutional conditions and societal factors that lead our clients to our door, then what are we really doing? So thank you, Edmund, for all that you do. You are not a nucleus. You are someone that others run to, not just for your brilliance, but because you inspire people to dream bigger and do better. There is no one more deserving of this award.
Thank you to the Access to Justice Board, and thank you to the Washington State Bar Association for this award. And thank you, Tram, for those kind words. You're right that I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by a number of incredible people, including yourself. And I know I wouldn't be here without my team at the Housing Justice Project, the community groups and organizers I've worked with over the last several years, my partner Allison, and our two sons, Theo and Owen. The fact that we give out an award commending an attorney who furthers access to justice implies that we are well aware of the fact that our justice system does not always provide equitable access. Yet cases continue to churn through its doors. We have a lot more work to do, and it's imperative that every member of the legal profession work toward making the system better. When I first started doing housing work in Washington a few years ago, I encountered eviction cases for as low as $2. Rather than as an indictment of that landlord who brought that case or their attorney that represented them, I think it's an indictment of the whole legal profession that a person could be evicted for $2. I think every lawyer here knows that a landlord and their attorney do not bring a case for $2 unless they suspect and anticipate that judiciary will entertain it. This was a symptom of a culture in which the landlord and their attorney know that the law will be applied with cruelty and coldness, indifferent to reason and humanity, in which a judge will likely and potentially evict a family for less than the price of a cup of coffee. We need to do more. We need to look closely at how our legal culture contributes to these inequities, how we often even take advantage of them in our own practice. Or as is more often the case, how we become indifferent to these inequities and accept them by saying it's not our problem or I'm just doing my job. Our legal system becomes stale and oppressive because our profession lets it. We let evictions happen for $2. We choose to wash our hands of these problems through some rationale tailored to our corner of the legal profession, or we let habit deaden us to the needs of others. So I just want to leave you with just one sort of quasi-law school academic philosophical question, which is, should someone be evicted for $2? What should the result be? If you're a judge and you have a case like this before you, what should you do? Because I've asked this question of students at a class I teach at Seattle University. I've asked judicial officers and candidates and other lawyers, and the answers are widespread and different. But I think it ultimately shows what you believe our law is and what it should be doing. And it asks us and it reveals where your compassion and your reason lies. We need to start asking these questions critically, internally, of our judges, of our lawyers, of our new lawyers, and we need to start digging into what our laws are and what their purposes are, and ultimately how our laws and can redeem our humanity and rather than shun it. Thank you again for this award.
My name is Danielle Alvarado. I am the legal director at the Fair Work Center. Our organization provides outreach, education, and legal services to low-wage workers across the states and advocates for new laws that raise pay, make work safer, and makes it easier for workers to speak up on the job. It is my great honor to present this year's Access to Justice Partnership Award to the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund Coalition. At the beginning of the pandemic, a diverse range of community groups, including members of the Alliance for Equal Justice, came together to develop a response to the impact of COVID-19 on immigrant workers. In addition to being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, unemployed, undocumented workers were excluded from both unemployment as well as all stimulus payments passed by Congress. The WRF Coalition organized a statewide campaign to push Washington state leaders to be bold and to meet the emergency needs of immigrant communities by creating one of the first publicly funded relief funds in the country. After securing initial funding from the governor, the WRF Coalition mobilized its statewide grassroots membership to do culturally competent, community-based outreach that resulted in more than 90,000 applications from nearly every county in the state. The coalition's success is the direct result of the trust organizations have painstakingly built over time, which made it possible for WRF to be a crucial source of support for tens of thousands of immigrant families in our state during an unprecedented public health and economic crisis. The coalition also successfully advocated for funding from the legislature this session, which expanded the relief fund and brought the total investment to date to more than $430 million in public funding for immigrant workers and their families. As the ATJ community and legal advocates continue to wrestle with how we can most meaningfully advance equity in our work, the WRF Coalition has shown us the impact that is possible when directly impacted community members' leadership, knowledge of community needs, and vision are placed front and center. The coalition's efforts have served as an inspiration and have helped to deepen a powerful statewide network of immigrant leaders who will continue to transform our state. We are inspired by the coalition's long-term vision for economic justice that includes all workers in our state safety net. Universal access to unemployment, along with paid family leave and sick time, will help make Washington a national leader in developing inclusive, equitable state systems that respect the incredible contributions of our immigrant communities. I am so proud to now hand it off to Kamau Chege with the Washington Community Alliance to accept this award on behalf of the coalition.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and to the Committee for the Access to Justice Award for this incredible opportunity and show of confidence in our work through the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund Coalition. Like Danielle said, my name is Kamau. I lead the Washington Community Alliance. I was part of the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund and part of the work to create that fund in the first place and grow it. And that came from being myself undocumented and having DACA and watching the pandemic roll through our communities. Something we were hearing over and over again was the danger that many of our communities felt being on the front lines of the pandemic, making sure that there was food in the grocery stores and our hospitals and healthcare systems still up and running. And there was this huge problem in that they could not access the same pandemic aid if they were laid off from work. And what I think the pandemic taught all of us in incredibly stark and dire terms is that our fates are interlinked. And what Dr. King had said many decades before, that we are caught in a network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny, is true. And for all of us to be for all of us to be healthy, all of us needed to be healthy. And that meant that undocumented immigrants needed access to pandemic aid so that they wouldn't have to go to work or out if they had the virus, because then they were putting everyone in danger on top of themselves. And by organizing and being disruptive when we needed to, we were able to get the state to fund the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund and ensure that undocumented immigrants were getting the pandemic aid that they needed to make sure that everyone was home and healthy so that we could defeat the virus. And I'm really excited about how that model is potentially going to lead to real equity and justice in the way we treat undocumented workers, that we begin to treat them like all workers and guarantee them the dignity that they deserve in the workplace. And if they're unemployed, that they have the social insurance that we guarantee to everybody else, so that we can all be in a healthier and better economy and community. And thank you again for this award.